What's going on, guys? Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of the Powerlifting for People podcast. I'm your host, Coach Gaglione. We've got an interview today with Angelina. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
Excellent. So yeah, I've seen Angelina compete for quite some time now on different high level meets over the years. Recently at the Walcott Wreckers. I'm not sure like what that was relative to like some of your best performances or not, but always, you got a very good like kind of, dots, formula and all that. And, obviously very strong for your weight class and just strong in general. But before we kind of get into like the present day, just tell us a little bit about yourself and then maybe just like kind of how you got into competition.
Yeah. So I started working out in 2016 because I had a 2-year old at the time and I had just I don't know, I never lost that weight. So I was like, well, I should probably just go lose weight. So I started going to the gym and I did weight training in high school. So I kind of like wasn't stupid in the gym. Do you know what I mean? Like I all I knew was really squat, bench, and accessories. And so these kids were like, "Hey, like you're strong." And I'm like, "Am I?" And they're like, "Yeah, you should do like powerlifting." And I'm like, "I don't even know what that is." And they're like, "Yeah, it's just squat, bench, and deadlift." And like, we have a competition coming up in like 4 months. And I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds fun." Like I had nothing going on in my life. So I was like, "Yeah, sure." And then that was it. I did my first RPS meet in 2017, and I've been doing it ever since.
And what were your numbers like for that first contest?
So it was no knee sleeves because I didn't want to use knee sleeves yet. So it was 240. My bench was 130, but I was mad because I failed 140 over. I forgot that you can't just rack it. So I missed the rack command. So I did finish it, but we'll say 130. And then deadlift was 295.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that was yeah. So that was and then since then, I know you've been kind of competing and starting to do, I guess, more like meets where you're traveling and doing some higher level competitions. So, was there ever like kind of a meet or defining moment or just kind of a period of time where you're like, okay, I'm pretty good at this. I want to like maybe like branch outside just the local scene and try your hand at like some of maybe like professional in quotations, but like some of these higher level meets. And I know, yeah, it's like, and whenever I say like pro powerlifting, sometimes people like roll their eyes, unless like your name is John Hack. But anyways, when did you kind of, I guess, maybe want to take this maybe a little bit more serious next level? Like, was there a moment that you thought, man, I could really kind of pursue this and do really well?
Yeah, I think it was 2020. Um, Steffi Cohen had posted about her hybrid meet, and you needed like a 460 dots or something. And I had like 465, and I was like, man, I'm strong. I should probably just so yeah, in my little pea brain, I guess that was it. I was, five dots, or maybe it was Wilkes at that time. I think it was that old. Uh, but at that point, I was like, well, maybe we should just go see if like we're any good. And that was about it. And I think after that, I just did the same two meets like back to back. It was whatever one in Florida, and then whenever the American Pro showed up.
Sure. And I guess over like those some of those like kind of higher level meets, were there any in particular that were like maybe more meaningful or memorable for you? Did you have any like I don't know, kind of lifts that like or were maybe really big grinders or maybe lifts that kind of bumped you up a few places or anything like that?
Yeah, so the first American Pro, I was fighting. It was the only like competition where like I was like actively fighting for third place, but we didn't realize it until deadlifts. And then so it was really fun because I pulled one and then I seen the girl's coach go running to go change her attempt and then she them and then a B was like, "Hey, we got to go like 5 pounds over what we planned." And like the 5 pounds was already he already told me I had to go 5 pounds. So now we're looking at 11 pounds over. And I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine. That's fine." And then it came off the ground and I was like, wow, like we slid for third place today. So that was my fun part.
That's great. And I guess it seems like you have a kind of a good time and and all that as far as like when you're in a situation like that. Um, how was it like feeling like mentally? Like, did you feel like kind of a pressure? Were you kind of excited that you had? So like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I was just excited to have pressure because, like, at these meets, I'm not being whatever. Like, it's either like a bunch of people that are just going to outdot you by 50 dots. So you're just there. Like, it just, at least it was more active than just being there and like beating myself. Do you know what I mean? So it felt nice to be on someone's playing field and not like Christy Hawkins, you know what I mean? Like, where you're just like, wow, I will, let's just lift today, I guess.
Yeah, that's been like kind of a. It's funny you kind of say that. That's been kind of a critique of a lot of like the American Pro and stuff. It's kind of like okay, like Christy Hawkins or John Hack shows up, and it's kind of like everyone's kind of fighting for second, and so it's kind of I think from a like a sports standpoint, it's maybe a little bit less exciting sometimes, even though, and that's where I think sometimes where there are some people. I'm not really one of these people, but I've heard like other people talk about where sometimes like the untested side of things is more of a spectacle, a little bit less of a sport, because you have these like kind of outliers that it's kind of like So I do think it is good if you can seek out competition. I do think it is does make things a little bit more interesting and exciting. Um, and I think that's part of. I do think at a certain point, it's nice that you said that you noticed that okay, I hit this qualifying requirement. I'm going to test the waters and kind of see like what happens, and kind of I think that's definitely one way you can really continue to progress is you kind of just do something that's a little bit outside of your comfort zone. Um, yeah, so over the years, obviously you've kind of climbed the ranks and stuff like that. You had some great performances. What is your kind of training regimen kind of looking like, currently, and what does that like kind of like look like for you, and what are you like working towards at the moment?
Yeah. So I've been on a bodybuilding journey for almost a year now. I still powerlift like mainly. So I still pretty much do my powerlifting split. So I have 4 days a week training. I have a SBD day. And then that has like accessories afterwards. And then I have an incline day and then shoulders and like back workout. And then I have another leg day. So I squat and deadlift that day. And then more leg accessories. And then just another bench day and back accessories. So it's like if you just combine powerlifting and bodybuilding like together, that's just what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, and then on those, and I do have a little bit of kind of experience with that too. When I was in did my prep in 2020, um, when you are as far as your training right now, and obviously this could like evolve, like if you pick a show and those sorts of things, are you always doing your compound exercises usually first, and then like the isolation second? That's typically like how you do it.
Yeah, yeah, all my compounds first. I just feel weird. I think I'm just so like ingrained to like squat, bench, deadlift that like I can't start accessories first. Like I can't walk up to a machine first. Like that's not right.
And then as far as with some of like this isolation movements, are there any that I guess maybe are like very foreign to you that like you've had to like? So I know like for me personally, it was like I never really did like a lot of like side delt work. I never did a lot of as much direct arm work, things like that. Were there anything that was like completely foreign that was like maybe fun or challenging, or like what was kind of different as far as some stuff that maybe you hadn't done before for this goal?
Yeah, so lately it's been glute work. I've never worked glutes in my life, like not specifically. So I'm just in there feeling really dumb doing kickbacks and stuff. I feel like it's just I'm like this is not working. Hip thrust. I did a hip thrust machine the other week and I was like, this is hard. Like I was struggling with like a plate on each side and I'm like, there's girls in here doing like four on each side and I'm like,
So that's a really good point. So just we kind of glossed over this a little bit. I forget to I always like to ask what's your kind of iron cred. So what is like some of your best like squat, bench, deadlift total? Like what is if you could
yeah.
share with the
Yeah.
audience?
So squat in wraps, 446 in comp. I like to also say 458 because I did go down and up, but they didn't call it, so it's fine. And bench, my best in comp was 270. Again, I did go up with 274, but they call me for turbulence, which is fine. And then deadlift, the most I've ever done is 462.
Nice. So one of the things that we have, I don't know if it's like we like collectively as like equipped lifters and stuff, but sometimes if we like squatted a lift that we thought was good or whatever, we say, "Oh, I stood up with 1,000," or "I stood up with," that's so you could steal that. So you can say, "I stood up with whatever. I stood up with 470," or
Yeah.
so
And I
you can
I
use
down.
that. So so that way it's like not like, well, it's like I didn't say I got white lights, but I stood up with it.
I like that. I will be stealing that.
Yeah, so you can make that like a thing.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so the reason I wanted to ask you about your numbers too, because I think sometimes people, I'm sure you see this all the time at the gym you train at, people, you go to a commercial gym is, um, when you have a bodybuilding focus and your hypertrophy focus, muscle building focus, the load is important, but also like if you don't have that like kind of connection to the muscle, like you actually want to make sure the target muscle is the thing that's failing, the thing that's using. So I think someone like 400-pound squatter, 400-pound deadlifter, you would think like, but then it's like, okay, if you haven't really have experience connecting with your glutes right now, like there's no shame in like just putting a plate on each side and just actually making sure you're doing the movement like properly. Because I think that sometimes I'll see that like now that we have our own gym, I'm not kind of at the commercial gyms, but when I first moved down to Delaware, I would see some like young kids, whatever, like curling, whatever, 20 pounds more than me, and my arms are like, multiple inches bigger. And I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm like, if you think that's working for you, that's great. But it's just like kind of like there's this disconnect. So the powerlifting kind of mindset and the bodybuilding mindset, like they can like work together. But like, what would you say is how do you approach the movements a little bit different? Like when you're okay, this is my goal is now like kind of building this muscle versus moving the weight from point A to point B. Like, what are some things that have helped you kind of with like the muscle growth like process?
Yeah, so it's funny. I've been trying to do bodybuilding since like 2021. So, since I would always cut so much weight, so my weight would range for powerlifting in the off season. I'd be 146 and I'd weigh 123 when I weigh in. So I was always diet. So I would diet myself down to 130. And then, of course, the last bit I water cut or cut carbs, whatever I need to do at the moment. So since I've been trying to grow muscle this whole time, like I pretty much have been training the same exact way. So like for powerlifting, like me and a B have it pretty set out. Like I now listen to him. I'm a good client. You know what I mean? So we have that wave pretty much, mapped out. So it's just whether we're in a volume peaking, like wherever we're at. But then bodybuilding, like I just know that it's always going to be lighter weight on those machines because I'm always burnt out from compound lifts. Like I used to try to go really heavy on accessories until I realized that like I already did the work in the compound movement. Like this is more of like pump and like blood work and like mind connection on the machine side. Do you know what I mean? So I just know once I cross out of the barbell path that I'm into lightweight. Well, not lightweight, but lighter weight, like sustainable controlled weight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said about like using the compound lifts as kind of like your driver for strength and like you're having more neural adaptations and you're really like loading your body with that. And I think there's something to be said also about like it may not necessarily be it's relatively lighter, but you're still having it's still high effort. I think that's where it's still high effort. So I think that is good. And that's something I do like the me personally, the contrast of like, okay, like there's something satisfying about standing up with a heavy squat or a heavy deadlift, but also like getting a sweet pump for your arms and like feeling that burn is nice too. And I think they can kind of complement each other. And I do think that even if you don't have aspirations of getting on stage, I think that like a lot of powerlifters could benefit from like understanding some of those concepts, even just for like joint health, um, body recomposition, like after a meet and stuff. That's something that like before we started recording, I kind of mentioned I was a super heavyweight lifter, and I wish I took periods of time to get in better shape, strip the fat down, because a lot of times I might have a great squat in a competition, but then I wouldn't be able to finish the meet because I was just in such bad shape or so there is like a level of endurance that can be beneficial even in something that's so strength dominated like powerlifting. Um, have you kind of ventured into, I guess, I would assume at some level, but like posing, like, have you got some coaching with that? Like how, because I know that was something too, like that I was surprised at how difficult and strenuous posing could be. So I wasn't sure like what your experience with that so far has been, and any like thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I will be getting a posing coach soon. Like I just didn't want to like pay all these coaches tons of things.
A lot
So
of, a lot of
I
things.
do my, we YouTube things and I do my posing in the exile room that makes me look really good. And so we just take it for what that is. So yeah, so that's about it. So I will get one because I know like that's an important part. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't just show up and just because I've seen that too many times. I'm like, will not be that person. So once like I get like a confirmed show, then I'll start working that side. But I know it's going to be rough.
Yeah, no, it's I was surprised on how difficult that was, and I definitely have a lot more respect for just even the sport of bodybuilding, just having gone through the process and doing one show myself, and I'm sure you will feel the same way. So the other kind of piece of this obviously is kind of the nutrition aspect. Have you before I guess you started with this venture, like was there anything kind of I guess major changes to your nutrition since like bodybuilding's been on your radar? Or like have you like what's been kind of like your outlook for like nutrition for not only what you're doing now, but just for for lifting in general?
Yeah. So I didn't start taking nutrition seriously until 2021. I got with a B, and I'm sure you know Dakota. I had Dakota as my nutrition, and that changed my life forever. Like she literally, like she had me do all like because I never tracked my macros like that. Do you know what I mean? I would just be like eating less, sure, right? And then she had me not be scared of food. I thought I couldn't eat over a certain amount of calories. Do you know what I mean? So after that, I pretty much like I went and of course I branched off of her. Like when me and her didn't work together anymore because I basically was like, hey, I can do this on my own. And so after that, I just lived with my fitness pal when it came to like powerlifting preps and stuff.
When I guess it seems like obviously like anything else, the more you use, the more you track, the more you kind of input that data, you get better at it, you get more comfortable. If someone's like kind of just starting out in their nutrition kind of aspect of training, um, you kind of mentioned that like now you're kind of okay, you have like a better understanding of like what's a calorie intake for performance, what's maybe a calorie intake for cutting. Um, any kind of tips for people getting started with that if maybe they're a strength athlete and they're just really new to like whether counting their macros, calories, just dieting in general? Do you have any tips for people that are just getting started?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can afford it, it would be really nice to get someone. If you can't, there is, I think online, I've used it a couple times. There's like a macro calculator thing, and it can like get your maintenance weight. But the biggest thing is like, one, you can't be scared of the scale. The scale is only there to let you know if the numbers are working for the calories. And to also, like, you have to be very patient. If you're not going to lose 5 pounds in a week, I mean, maybe, right? But for most people, you're not. So, like, literally going down by points of stuff is also nice. So, I think finding a maintenance calorie is like just the biggest one that people will probably struggle with. So, like, whether it would be Googling and then to really input everything. I don't think people also understand like sauces count, like little tiny things
Yeah.
count, and it's so depressing. Man, it's hard to log it, and you're like, I want to not log it, but if you don't log it, you're just going to be like, oh, I'm eating less and less, and I'm like, you're not eating less and less. So you have to be pretty honest with yourself. So honestly, in the beginning, it's so nice to have someone to like be that person and be like, hey, no, you have to track everything. So I will say that.
Yeah, I think having accountability is huge, and I think it's. I'm glad that you kind of mentioned because there's like kind of sometimes people like, oh, you don't. I think that the more it's just like kind of training, like you wouldn't just like put weights on the bar blindly. Like you want to know, like, well, what's the load on the bar? Like, how many reps did you do? And then like like just like you kind of track your sets and reps. If you do want to make meaningful changes to your body composition, like you need to kind of measure that in some capacity. So, yeah, I think that's a really, really good advice. Don't be afraid of the scale. And then I think with all the macro calculators, you just understand it's an estimate, and you got to see what the scale does, and then you can kind of adjust from there. So I think that that's really good advice for people starting out. So Next piece, I know we've been kind of chatting about this here and there. I know we've been kind of messing around with some strict curls like here and there. Just kind of curious, maybe what kind of sprung that up for you, and what your interest was, and if you have any other, you know, kind of plans for a goal for that, or just how that's been kind of going.
Yeah, so there's a guy at my gym. I think his Instagram's King Michael. I've seen him and I follow him on Instagram. And I think well, end of last year, he posted a strict curl competition. I was like, what is that? And so I thought it was the coolest. So then I started like kind of, going around Instagram, like looking up strict curl stuff. And I'm like, well, this looks fun. And since like bodybuilding is just kind of a slow process. And then I'm not actively powerlifting. So I was like, well, and so I've just been training strict curl once a week. And I have two heavy days, well, heavy days at the beginning of my block. And then I do kind of more rep work towards the end. And I don't know, I think it's fun.
Yeah, and I think you kind of mentioned before, I think before the recording too, sometimes like especially when you get to the higher ranks of powerlifting, especially with the squats and deadlifts, could be maybe tough on the back, hips, knees, those sorts of things. And then if you're always kind of like signing up for the next meet, you're always kind of like into the next training cycle on peaking again, and you don't really get that time to like let your spine recover, let your joints recover, and not even just like kind of mentally recover from like if you have a really if you're traveling, you have like a really tough competition, whether it went well or not, it's there's a lot of stress that kind of goes into that. So I do think that one of the things that I found too, especially with something like a single lift meet that's like it's a lower absolute load, you're not like putting hundreds and hundreds of pounds on your back. So I think it could be a good way to kind of scratch the competitive itch, but still, and again, it still can be stressful on your body, of course, but just the overall systemic stress is going to be much lower. And that's kind of something that I found with myself and some of our athletes. And it could be a way, like, even as we get older, maybe some of our joints go or whatever, or like maybe we just don't want to have the stress of training for three lifts, because as you know, it's hard to kind of max out all three lifts at the same time. So I think something like a single lift competition, just don't write it off. And sometimes too, like if you kind of are able to step away from maybe your number one sport or whatever that is, and you could always kind of come back to it and kind of be mentally revitalized as well. So yeah, so it's really cool. I guess as far as like your first couple of I guess attempts at like kind of learning some of the techniques and stuff, like what have your first impressions been with how difficult it is, how it feels, like what has that been like for you?
Yeah, so I didn't know the bar was so like it's a pretty big bar, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Um, the way that I wanted to grab it, luckily, like, because I didn't even ask like Michael, like if he could help me. Like he was just around, and he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm pretending to strict curl," and he was like, "Here, let me help you," because like I wanted my hands like on the wider grips. He was like, "No, you gotta." And then like the other thing is like how far down your palm it has to
So
go.
deep, yeah.
Yeah, that's super awkward. Um, of course, I just wanted to curl it like just regular. And like he showed me the other way and it kind of clicked with me. And he was like, wow, you're a quick learner. And I'm like, it's not perfect, sir, but thank you for that encouragement. But yeah, it's a lot different. I still haven't quite figured out, like, I just feel like I'm propping myself up against the wall. Like, I feel like I don't know if you're supposed to like kind of use leg drive that part I'm not connecting with. I think it's just all whatever my arms are doing that day. But yeah, I haven't figured out leg drive if there is any.
Yeah, so basically as long as there's no knee movement after the start command, like you can't like, bend and rebend your knees and kind of that sort of thing. But I do think that if you're a pretty accomplished and strong bencher, and I think that if you coordinate the leg drive in a similar way, but you're also like having the intention of like kind of driving, not just like it's the same thing with the bench. Like if you just drive your hips up, then your butt's going to come off the bench, right? If you kind of drive back into the platform, same kind of idea. That's kind of like how I like to teach it. The hard part is like it's the timing of it, right? So you want to make sure that you time it in a way that the knees stay like locked, but you're still kind of putting pressure into the ground. So if you are watching someone on a video, you might not like see, but if you see like a good strict curl athlete in person, you're going to see like their legs are kind of quivering because there's so much like pressure going down into the ground. So yeah, once you kind of get that, like you're kind of like really locked in, and it also kind of helps keep your back and your glutes kind of against the wall. But yeah, it's not just biceps, like your legs are kind of stabilizing the lift, and like it's a lot of traps and shoulders, and like I said, it's just kind of fun because it's like another like kind of compound exercise that you can kind of push yourself on. And then with the gopher bar specifically, like you said, it does take a little bit getting used to as far as the grip. And if you don't have the correct grip, it can kind of also work against you. So what the analogy I like to kind of use is if you ever, I know you kind of mentioned the American Pro, like when the Kabuki bar was first kind of introduced, the Kabuki bar might help some people, but it also might be like harder if you don't get the timing right, it actually will throw you down. So same thing with like kind of the gopher bar. It's a lot less forgiving than like a normal like easy bar or straight bar. But if you can get the timing down, if you can get the grip locked in, it can like potentially assist you with that kind of turnover. So yeah, it's just kind of so using the deadlift bar, stiff bar analogy. That's kind of and then like, once you kind of are able to utilize the bar to your advantage, you can get like a performance benefit. But yeah, I think that from what I've seen, like you're looking good. I'm excited to see you get on the platform that, and I think that would be like a nice kind of compliment to before you start your like official like bodybuilding prep and season. So next kind of things before I wrap up. Someone's kind of listening to this. Maybe they're a new lifter, maybe they're a female. They're not really sure where to start. You kind of, it sounded like you kind of like a lot of people like, oh, you look pretty strong. Why don't you try this? But if someone was maybe on the fence, or maybe they don't feel like, oh, like I don't know if I should compete. What advice would you give to somebody that was just maybe starting off with their own strength journey?
Yeah, definitely if you want to compete, even if you like have like the slightest interest, just sign up for a meet. You'll be just fine. Um, I didn't really know much my first meet. They didn't really give me a big rundown. They didn't really know anything themselves. It was great. 2017 powerlifting was absolutely great at my gym. Um, but yeah, just I don't know, just have fun and you have to just want to actively, I don't know. If you have a love for lifting weights, then powerlifting will forever be your friend. You know what I mean? It's just always there. It's something to be proud of. It's something to distract you from life. That probably shouldn't be the big ambition, but you know what I mean? It has helped me in that respect of my life. You know what I mean? So yeah, if you're on the fence, just try it. You will probably love it. Get you a coach and see how far you can take it.
Yeah, and I think that like you won't know unless you try, and if you hate it, obviously you don't. But I think just kind of ripping the band-aid off and trying is always my recommendation as well. And to your point too, yeah, like some of us sometimes we have stuff that's not going great in our lives, or we have stressors and stuff, and if we for that whatever hour and a half, maybe sometimes more, for like if we're in a prep, but if for that period of time we're at the gym, if we can kind of hone in, be present, focus on something positive, I do think that's something really good, not just for your body, but
For your mind,
your
yes.
mind. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know you also kind of mentioned about that. You said that you're a mom, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that kind of comes up. I know sometimes moms feel like they might feel a certain sense of guilt if they're away from their kids for a certain period of time, if they're like at the gym for a long time. So like how do you like kind of, I guess, deal with some of those emotions, or if someone's maybe like, oh, like, well, why are you at the gym so much? Or why are you like, why are you doing all, so like, I guess, what is your feeling on that? And how has, if it has, how has lifting maybe like made you, a better person like in your household?
Yeah. So I mean, I lucked out. So for my first like years of powerlifting, like someone was at the house so I could go like real late at night and that's when I lifted. You know what I mean? When she got a little older, there was daycare. Um, but there you shouldn't feel guilty. And I tell people this all the time because you have to have something for you. Like you pour so much into other people, like this is the only thing that's like me, that's like strictly my time. Do you know what I mean? And now she's turning 11 and she's been going to the gym with me for about a month.
Nice.
So trying to get her getting bit on the powerlifting bug. Do you know what I mean? It's working so far. So I think we're good. But it's just you gotta have something for you or else you will actually go insane. And it doesn't have to be lifting, it can be anything, but you just need some time by yourself and you shouldn't feel guilty for that. And I hate that because, moms and or dads are people too that just need some just them time.
Yeah, and then the way I look at it also too is if you're stronger, if you're healthier, if you're feeling better about yourself, you have more confidence, you're only going to be able to execute like parenting better, and you're going to like kind of. And then I think it's also important if you want your kids to be healthy, and they don't necessarily need to be like a world champion or anything like that, but I think that like the best way you can lead is by example. So if you want your kids to have healthy habits, if you want your kids to exercise, that's something that we like, kind of incorporate. They don't train as often as we do, but if they're coming into the gym once or twice a week, that's great. And at least they're kind of exposed to it. So, but yeah, it was great chatting with you. If people want to follow your training or kind of learn more about you, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram, Captain Angelina.
All right, excellent. Well, I appreciate you having being on the podcast today. If you guys enjoyed the interview, please share it. Please give the podcast a 5-star review. It helps other people find us. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.